Hello everyone. As we reach to the end of the previous video, we will start now speaking and explaining the idea behind the sine and cosine and tangent of both angles as 30 degree and 60 degree. And to do this, let's talk about this expression that could help you to remember the relationship of sine and cosine and tangent as follows. So we can use like SOH, so, and then we use the CAH, which is ka, and finally we have TOA, toa, so su, ka, tua. So we use it as follows. The S represent the sine, and the C represent the cosine, and the T represent the tangent. For the O in this case represent what we call it the opposite. The same with the O here, it is the same as the O in this side, which is the opposite also. Now we can talk about the A. The A represent the adjacent, and we can see that the A here is the same as the A here, so here is the adjacent. Finally, we will talk about the H, and the H in this case represent the hypotenuse, and this H here is the same as H here, which is the hypotenuse. Okay, to use this very efficiently, we can start with this triangle. So if we suppose that this angle here is 90 degree, and for example this angle is 30 degree, and this angle here is 60 degree, I will remind you about the measurement that we talked about before as follows. For the 90, which is now opposite to the hypotenuse, the largest side, which is 2. Now 30, which is the smallest angle opposite to the smallest side, which is in this case 1, and we will left with square root of 3, which is the side that is opposite to the 60 degree. We will start with the first one, which is so, as follows, SOH. Now the S, as we said before, is representing the sine, so we will start with sine, and we will start with 30, so we need sine of 30 as follows. Okay, and this will equal 2. As you see, the O here will represent the opposite, and here is the 30, and here is the side which is opposite to the 30, which is 1. So we need to take the 1 to the numerator in this case. So now this one, take it to the numerator as follows, like this is equal 1. Now for the second one, which is the H, which is hypotenuse, here is the hypotenuse. What we need to do is take in the 2, in this case, as hypotenuse, and write it down here in the denominator. So we will write something like this, 2. So we can say the sine of 30 is the opposite, as we said, the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. The sine 30 is like the opposite divided by the hypotenuse, which is equal 1/2. Now, we can talk now about the sine of 60, for example. Sine of 60 degree. Let me take this down a little bit. So the sine of 60 degree. To talk about the sine of 60 degree, we will use the same strategy. Here is the sine of 60 degree. Then let's talk about the opposite sine of the 60 degree. Here is the 60 degree. And the opposite side for the 60 degree is the square root of 3. So you need to take the square root of 3 here in the numerator. So write it down here. So it will be like this, square root of 3. And then you can take the h, which is the hypotenuse. Here is the hypotenuse, which is the largest side, which is 2. Now you need to take the 2 here in the denominator and write it down. So now in this case, the sine of 60 is equal to the square root of 3 divided by 2. Square root of 3 is the opposite of 60, and the 2 is the hypotenuse in this triangle. The second thing we need to talk about now is the cosine, which is ca. So we can start as follows. So CAH. Let's start now with the angle 30 first. So talking about the angle 30, we need to take the cosine of the 30 as follows. So we take the C as cosine, then 30 degree equal to. Starting with the A as adjacent, talking about the 30 now. The adjacent, which is the nearest to the 30, which is square root of 3. So take the square root of 3 and write it down here in the numerator. So the adjacent for 30 is square root of 3. Now the second thing is talking about the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse in this case is 2. Take the 2 in the denominator down there here. So take the 2 down there here and write it down. So here is the answer 2. So the cosine of 30 is square root of 3, and square root of 3 is the adjacent for the 30, and the 2 which is the hypotenuse in this case. Later we can talk about now, okay, cosine the 60 degree. Using the same strategy, we are talking about the cosine of 60. I'm talking about this 60. We will start with the adjacent of the 60. So here is the 60, and here is the nearest for the 60, which is like the 1. So take the 1 and write it down here in the numerator as adjacent. We reached now to the 1, so we write the 1 here in the numerator as follows. So we can write 1. Then we can take the hypotenuse h. So here is the hypotenuse. Here is the hypotenuse, and we can take the hypotenuse as 2, and we take it down as follows like this. So here is the 2. So take down the 2 as hypotenuse, and the answer will be like this. So now the cosine of 60 is equal 1/2. The last thing we can talk about now is the TUA. Here is the TUA. Okay, how to use the TUA? We can use it as follows. So we have TOA as TUA. Now we can talk about the 30. So we start with the T. The T here is the tangent of 30. So we can write it down as follows. So now tangent of 30 degree equal to, we use the same strategy. Here is the O, so here is the 30, and the opposite of the 30 is 1. So we take the 1 and we write it here in the numerator as follows. This is the opposite of 30. Then we take the A, which is adjacent for the 30. Here is the nearest for the 30, which is square root over 3. Take the square root over 3 and write it down here in the denominator. So the answer will be like this, square root of 3. So the tangent of 30 actually is 1 over square root of 3. So 1 as the opposite of the 30 and square root over 3 as adjacent to the 30. The last thing here to talk about is the tangent of 60 degree. Using the same strategy, tangent of 60 is as follows. So we take the opposite of the 60, and the opposite of 60 is the furthest, like this, which is square root over 3. Take the square root over 3 and write it down here in the numerator. So the answer will be like this. Let me take this down first, so to make space for writing. So now here is the square root of 3. And now, secondly, we use the A, which is adjacent to the 60, and which is the nearest to the 60, which is 1 here. So take the 1 and write it down in the denominator. It will be something like this, 1. So the tangent of 60 is square root of 3, square root of 3, which is the opposite of the 60, and 1, which is adjacent to the 60. So we can do this as summary by saying that the sine of any angle, for example theta, is equal to opposite divided by hypotenuse, that's the SUA. So we can say something like opposite divided by hypotenuse, and then we can summarize as follows. Cosine, for example theta, as angle equal to, look at the cosine. So we have cosine, which is A adjacent over hypotenuse. So we can write something like this, adjacent over hypotenuse. And finally, we can say the tangent, which is equal to as follows. We can use this one, the tangent, which is opposite divided by adjacent. So we can write it down as follows, opposite divided by adjacent. Hope you get the idea about how to find the sine and cosine and tangent of the two angles, which is 30 and 60, in the special triangle, as we said before, which is the 30 degree and the 60 degree and the 90 degree triangle, which is here the side is 2, and as we said, the side here is 2, and here is 1, and here is square root over 3, and here is the 90. Hope you get this idea. See you guys in the next videos to make the math more and more easy.